Is choosing a luxury mini LED TV for a bright room still the best option? Let's find out. Hello and welcome to another video on AV Forums. I'm Phil Hinton, the site editor, and I'm fully trained THX and ISF calibrator with 20 years of experience. In this video we are looking at the Samsung QN95C Mini LED QLED TV. The QN95C is available in three screen sizes, starting with 55-inch at £2,400, a 65-inch at £3,300, a 75-inch at £4,800 and a massive 85-inch screen at £5,500. The 65-inch TV we're reviewing is a set that was provided by Samsung UK, and it was completely brand new, sealed and out the box fresh. It is strange that Samsung Electronics still push their QLED TVs as the flagship models of their TV range, as the QD-OLED S95C is arguably the smarter choice for superior picture quality and dynamic range. However, saying that, there are still many use cases for a quality mini LED solution, like those with bright rooms or those who want to game on a set where they don't have to worry about image retention or burn-in. It certainly feels like a premium set, and there is support for HDR10, HDR10 Plus and HLG hybrid log gamma high dynamic range formats, and as we've become accustomed to, there's absolutely no support at all for Dolby Vision. It uses a VA panel with a quantum dot filter and a mini LED backlight with 1,344 separate dimming zones available. Samsung calls this quantum matrix technology, which incorporates an advanced local dimming algorithm that assists with creating the most dynamic range possible, utilising all the available zones. Samsung has also finally listened to the enthusiast market and now makes sure that their TVs are able to produce the most accurate image quality to the standards in the Filmmaker Mode picture preset. This picture mode is available with HDR10, HDR10 Plus and SDR sources, and it's designed to get the grayscale and colour gamut tracking as close as possible to the industry standards, so you can view content as it was mastered and intended to be seen. Gaming is also a strong point, with Samsung offering 4 full bandwidth 48GB per second HDMI 2.1 ports and the ability to run at a maximum of 4K 144Hz with a gaming PC and super wide gaming view. With the latest generation of consoles, you get 4K 120Hz, FreeSync Premium Pro VRR support, ALLM Auto Low Latency Mode, EARC and HDIG support. There's also Samsung Game Hub with settings for all types of gamers, as well as access to gaming content without the use of a PC or a console. Overall, with an input lag measuring at 9.9 milliseconds for 4K 60 and 5.9 milliseconds for 4K 120, the gaming credentials are very good indeed. The Tizen Smart TV system looks modern and fresh, but it's not very intuitive and it takes a little bit of getting used to, especially when using the smaller remote control. Finding some features takes a number of button presses, but for most content, video on demand services and the menus, the system is fast and it performs well. Unlike the recently reviewed S95C QD-OLED, the QN95C does not come with a One Connect box. Instead, all of the source and power leads are connected directly to the rear of the panel, with some indentation strips for cable management provided. We go into the picture quality measurements in detail within the written review on AV Forums, so head over to read all of the details on the out-of-the-box and calibrated results there. We fully measured and tested the out-of-the-box settings, as well as calibrating the QN95C and put it through some rigorous testing, including side-by-side comparisons with its closest rivals. If you want to know what the best settings are out of the box, then you can also check out our settings video. In the most accurate to D65 Filmmaker mode, the Samsung QN95C measured 1,745 nits on an industry standard 10% window and 602 nits full screen. These are excellent results and are to be expected from a mini LED set like the QN95C. However, it's not all good news, as the TV has to mitigate blooming and clouding from the dimming zones by suppressing specular highlights, and this robs the image of contrast and dynamic range, and we'll cover this more later in the review. It should be noted that the QN95C will go much brighter in other picture presets, but we are only interested in accurate image quality to the standards here at AV Forums. Moving to PQ EOTF tracking to the ST2084 standard, and the QN95C in filmmaker mode is accurate to the standards and it doesn't push brightness over the top. The wide colour gamut to DCI P3 standard was a little bit of a mixed bag, as the brightness and volume are excellent, however the saturation tracking isn't especially accurate, especially the hue errors in green and magenta. These errors are not really seen with actual viewing content, and the saturation tracking at all brightness levels is much better than it is in the native or BT2020 colour space options. We measured BT2020 at 67% XY and 73% UV, with P3 coming in at 93% XY and 95% UV. Moving to screen uniformity, displaying a 5% brightness slide, and we see that edges are slightly brighter than the centre of the screen, and there are faint darker edges of the panel across the entire screen surface. This is also visible at other brightness levels and manifests itself as dirty screen effect when watching actual TV and film content in dim surroundings. As the slides get brighter, the sides of the screen also start to show a vignette effect with darker edges, and the uniformity of white is very patchy. Motion is good on the QN95C, with no obvious issues seen with 24 frames per second content, which is displayed with the correct pull down applied, and 50Hz broadcast is also decent with no obvious frame skipping or micro stutters seen. Upscaling is also good, but this is where the Samsung QN95C can look processed, with its sharpening and edges looking a little false. Video processing is very good overall, it's just not as well polished as the best out there, such as LG and Sony. Moving to HDR10, including HDR10 Plus content with the QN95C, and this is where it can excel and frustrate in equal amounts. We're about to show you some side-by-side comparison shots on video, but bear in mind that these are not representative of what I can see here in person, and that this is being captured by a camera with a restricted dynamic range. It's then edited and compressed to upload to YouTube, and then further compressed and changed by YouTube before you then see it on your display, which is probably not calibrated, so it'll look different again to what I see here in person. So these clips really are for illustration only, don't make any assumptions. First up, we compared the QN95C with the S95C QD OLED. We set both TVs to filmmaker mode and used the usual test clips to assess picture quality in detail. Obviously, the QN95C is a mini LED TV with much brighter peak highlight capabilities, but it also has to suppress haloing, which can impact the overall picture quality and dynamic range that's available. Blacks are much stronger on the S95C, as you would expect, given that it's an OLED panel with instant on-off brightness from each and every pixel, whereas the QN95C has to use local dimming and mini LED grids to create the image. There's also issues with viewing angles with the QN95C, which can impact the image if not viewed directly onto the TV. As such, the QN95C does look slightly washed out with raised blacks and a lack of overall contrast when it's compared in direct comparison with the S95C in dim surroundings. There's also a really noticeable dimming down of small peak highlight areas in the image on the QN95C as it tries to suppress blooming around those areas, which again starts to restrict the dynamics of the image. It may measure 1745 nits on a 10% window, but look at the smaller window sizes, and the QN95C has to lower the available brightness to stop and suppress any blooming and haloing. And this is very obvious in scenes with small specular highlight areas, such as the light on the side of a honey spoon glistening from the Spears and Munsell demo footage. This looked dull on the QN95C compared to the S95C, which popped out with great dynamics and contrast. Colours also look surprisingly muted on the QN95C when it's in direct comparison with the S95C, even though it's a QLED and it's using quantum dots. This was noticeable with skin tones as well, with a muted look in films in direct contrast to the pop and wow factor on the OLED. And even the usual strong point of bright room viewing, where the QN95C would usually be the first recommendation, just wasn't as clear cut, given the S95C is very bright and it handled normal living room lighting in its stride. We were surprised with the results here, and the S95C definitely scored the best in the areas that we test during our comparisons. Next up was the LG G3, and once again we set both TVs to the filmmaker mode, and testing was conducted in dim and bright viewing conditions. On paper, the Mini LED Samsung should be the far brighter TV in this comparison and better suited to bright room viewing, plus it should also have better colour volume. For SDR content, it certainly is slightly brighter than the G3, but it's not as night and day as you would imagine, and the G3 is now a TV I would be happy to recommend that you use in a brighter environment with no fears of image washout or an image that's going to be too dark. The new screen filter on the G3 also helps with reflections and does so without adding a rainbow across the screen as the QN95C does. Black levels and dynamic range are better on the LG G3, with OLED's advantage shining through here with no signs of blooming or clouding that could be an issue with the Mini LED set. What the QN95C does to combat blooming is to dim bright highlights that are against slightly dark backgrounds, but this kills the dynamic range seen in the image. And in comparison, this was very obvious in person, with the G3 able to produce stunning bright highlights next to complete black thanks to the per pixel switching of OLED. Even with the latest Mini LED technology and the amount of zones it has, the QN95C still has to dim down the brightest parts of the image to stop that blooming. And in terms of video processing, we again found that the LG G3 had the edge here for image processing, motion and upscaling, with the QN95C having the slight edge with colour volume and overall full screen brightness. Overall, I would personally pick the LG G3 given its improvement in bright room viewing, better image processing and motion, and the upscaling is superior, along with a much better and higher dynamic range when it comes to HDR presentation compared to the QN95C using blooming suppression that basically affects the overall dynamic range it's able to produce. Plus, if Dolby Vision is important to you, the QN95C still doesn't support that format. Finally, we switched to the TCL C845 Mini LED TV. We used the filmmaker mode on the QN95C and movie mode on the TCL C845, as those are the most accurate out-of-the-box presets on both sets. A quick look online at the time of this review in July 2023 shows the QN95C at £3,300 and the TCL C845 is £1,049. So does that price increase get you a much better image on the Samsung? First of all, image accuracy to the standards out of the box is much better on the QN95C in filmmaker mode, which is just so much better than TCL's movie mode in that respect. The C845 has too much blue in the grayscale, which then affects the Rec 79 colours in SDR mode. With HDR10 content, we also see very similar inaccuracies. However, we're not really talking about anything that would be a big deal breaker given the price difference. Where we see the main differences are with the dimming algorithms and how that translates to the final image on both the sets. We noticed more blooming with certain tricky tests on the TCL, with the Samsung looking slightly dimmer in the highlights, but with better blacks and less blooming visible in dim viewing surroundings. Motion is also better on the Samsung, with slightly better upscaling from TCL, which doesn't look as processed as the QN95C. Colour reproduction was very similar on both sets, but overall, in dim surroundings, the TCL did manage to produce the slightly more dynamic looking image, as the Samsung just dimmed down its image ever so slightly more because there was a chance of blooming being seen, where the TCL was not quite as aggressive. Another visible difference was with shadow details and black levels, with the TCL looking dark yet dynamic and the Samsung showing more detail with a slightly elevated just above black area. This was more noticeable in darker scenes that looked a little bit too washed out on the QN95C in the most accurate picture mode. Overall, Samsung has better build quality, better materials, a nicer smart TV system and OS, plus it displayed less blooming in dim surroundings, but at the expense of peak brightness and highlights in HDR. However, it could be argued that with all of the HDR formats covered, such as Dolby Vision, and a £2,050 price difference that isn't really seen in the image quality differences when compared to in the most accurate picture settings, the TCL might be the better option for those looking for a living room workhorse. So let's wrap this up. If you're looking for an excellent 4K LCD TV for bright room duties with normal everyday TV, films and HDR movies, whether viewing streaming or disc, the QN95C has many plus points on offer. Plus, as a gaming TV, it gives you excellent bright room image quality mixed with very good gaming features and capabilities. The only issue for some will be the lack of Dolby Vision support, some light DSE when viewing content like sports, and the very expensive price point when it's compared to rivals. Don't forget, the full in-depth review at AV Forums goes into all of this in much more detail, so head over and check it out. And if you've enjoyed this review, then please do leave us a like. And if you want to see more TV reviews from AV Forums, including our thoughts on the 2023 flagship models, then please consider subscribing to the channel. Thanks for watching.